So the next step is to take my arms and my bodies that are now both painted up and to glue them together. So this is the last stage in the sub-assembly process. So at this stage it's quite fiddly, I find, to put on the arms because you've got the gun that needs to join both there and to where the strap is, and then you've got this arm here. And trying to glue all of them together is almost impossible. It doesn't help that the strap actually is quite short, so I've got to angle the melters up on all of them, so it doesn't give you any flexibility in where this can go. So if you look at one of the others, they're kind of all going to be in this identical pose. It's not too bad because, you know, melters are going to be aimed at kind of tanks or monstrous creatures, so it's more likely to be pointed up than down. But I'd have liked a few where the angle was a bit more kind of horizontal. So what I found at the moment is a little good technique is to just blue tack one arm down while you glue the other. So I've put a little bit of blue tack just there, and I've used that as a placement for this section while I've been gluing this arm in place with the gun. So I can take this off, and as you can see, the blue tack there and that arm is now kind of glued in place. Now that's dry, I can then kind of concentrate on just gluing this arm without a problem. Without doing any kind of alignment, trying to glue one arm in at a time means you're more likely to get stuck with one arm completely misaligned in the wrong direction. Trying to then reposition it is quite difficult because your arm of the join is glued in, and trying to then snap that off is a bit more tricky, and you run the risk of chipping the paint that's around the edges. So I've managed to glue all the arms on, and I've attached the cable just to the gun so far. It doesn't quite fit all the way around to the power pack, however it will. All I need to do is just use a hairdryer, and I can heat this up slightly, which will allow me to bend it all the way around to fit. So here's one I've already done. I've managed to heat it up just to wrap it all the way around, and it fits quite well. Some of them don't fit as well and might need a little bit of green stuffing, and again that's the sort of same with the joins as well. So here's one where it doesn't fit. I've managed to kind of heat wrap it around going from the power pack, but because of the kind of butt of the gun just here, it kind of stops me from joining it up just here. So with this one I'm just going to have to do a little bit of green stuffing just to fill in that gap. So likewise there's a few other gaps that will need green stuffing. A couple of the arms have gaps in them as well on the join, so you just need to double check that. So on this side there isn't too much of a gap, that's kind of quite acceptable I think. On this side there's quite a bit of a gap, so I'm going to have to green stuff that and paint it quite carefully. So this is the downside of sub-assembly. If I was to kind of pre-assemble this before I painted it, I could have green stuffed this to smooth over the gap so it's not noticeable at all. At this stage you could green stuff even the slight ones and then repaint it over, that wouldn't be too bad, but I don't think it's ideal. So I've fully assembled the models now. I thought I'd give you a bit of a run through in terms of how I posed a few of them. So I've reattached them to the cardboard strip because it'd be a bit more useful handling them for the next stages. So on the left I've got the sergeant with the hotshot las pistol and chainsaw. Then I've got the flamer with the extra canisters, fuel canisters on his back. Then the grenade launcher and two of the hotshot lasgun guys. On the back you can just see where the cable has been attached to the pack. The grenade launcher has his spare grenade and the kind of flame canisters on the back of that guy. So it was quite useful when I was doing this sub-assembly method to paint up these kind of straps on the back. These are normally covered by the spare backpacks, but I've kind of left them out for the time being, and I will paint them up separately and get around to adding the backpacks on for these three. They're not particularly essential for the model, so I've just left them out for now to help speed it up in terms of getting these guys ready for the tabletop. So here is my plasma specialist. He was originally converted up from the heavy stubber crew. And then I've got my 4 melters, all in a quite similar pose, but unfortunately there wasn't a lot I could do about that. But I think they look quite good. Then I've got my 2 heavy stubbers. I had already painted up the rock. So that was just a dry brush technique, going from Estrin to Scavin Blight, then to Dawnstone Grey, just slowly building up that dry brush effect to get the rock effect. I did that first because it would be really difficult to do it once I'd put the stubber down and trying to get into the slightly more fiddly parts. Now I was trying to work out whether that should actually really just be mud, because in trench warfare pretty much all kind of rocks end up just being covered in mud, so that's maybe a bit more realistic. But for now I thought I'd do it, paint up the rock colour, and then if I really want to go back and add the sterling mud, which is exactly the same as the texture that I'll be doing the bases in, then I can always redo it at a later stage. So here's my heavy flamer team. I'd initially glued them down to 25mm bases, but only very lightly. This meant they were just on the same standard bases as all the other models, and I could attach them to the cardboard. So it just meant it was really easy to paint them up. But I'd only lightly glued them down, so once it was painted I could remove them from the base quite carefully and easily without damaging the model, and then rebase them onto this large heavy weapon team style base. So you can just about see, although I've just primed it, there's part of one of the GW basing kits, one of the large parts, which formed this section. And then I just filled it out with some green stuff, which you can just see on this side, and some extra rocks. So that makes it a bit of a mini diorama. If I want to add in some extra detail such as barbed wire or the minefield signs from the transfer kit, I can do that too. Make it a bit more interesting. For now I'm going to just keep it to a sort of tabletop standard, and then I'll go back in at a later date and add these nice little touches in. So I'm nearing the last few stages, so there's 2 steps to do. One of them is to get it tabletop ready, which is just to base it, so paint the rim up and to put some texture down on the top of the base. There's also the chipping on the guns to still do, very similar to the backpack, like there. Then there's the kind of weathered chipping effect from the shoulder pads that I've done on all the other carapace items. But before I do that one, I really need to put the transfer numbers down on on their left shoulder pad. So there's these last 2 steps. It doesn't really matter which order you do them in. I'm going to do the basing first, just so it's all ready for the tabletop, and then when I have some extra time I can finish off with the extra highlights.